Hey, what's up everyone, and welcome to today's video. This episode will get you through the issues of the Uncanny X-Men published by Marvel Comics in 1983, with this issue being the last one of this year. Issue 176. A kiss on the lips. That's how Scott Summers surprisingly greets his new wife in the morning of their honeymoon. And it doesn't stop there. Madeline switches on the autopilot of the flying boat they are in until a little while later. They are head over heels in love with one another, but there's serious business to tend to. There's a nasty storm brewing behind them and it seems to catch up to them, even though they should be able to reach a safe harbor before then. Madeline asks Scott if he's made his decision yet, regarding joining his father and the Starjammers. He is not sure what to do, because he knows he might never see his father again after they have left the planet. But if he does join them, he may never return to Earth again as well. And suddenly they are smack dab in the middle of a squall line, creating massive turbulence. They get hit by lightning and the electrical systems aboard the plane short circuit and it starts to plummet down, in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. We then move over to Japan, where Murky is sleeping in her bed. Or so she was. As she wakes up, she asks who's there and what the person wants, and she finds the Yoshida family clan's honor blade on top of her. Wolverine is the one that woke her up. Apparently, Murky had sent the blade back to Wolverine after he had left it behind several days ago. He wants to know why she sent it back to him, and she tells him it belongs to him by right. He responds to her by saying that if that's true, so does she, as he looks straight at her. With tears running from her eyes, she tells him she loves him, and that nothing would make her happier than to become his wife. But it cannot be, she says. Wolverine calls bullshit. He now knows that Mastermind was the one behind her decision to call off the wedding. But since Xavier reversed the psychic damage Wingard caused, everything should be back to normal. But she tells him nothing is like the way it was before. She tells him that after everything that had happened when he killed her father, risking losing her in the process, his ties to the criminal organizations transfer to her, and while under the influence of Mastermind's trickery, she has bound herself to the Japanese underworld as well. Ties which must now be broken. Wolverine tells her to leave that to him, but she tells him no, she has to do it herself, she is honor bound. If he loves and respects her, he will allow her that much. He then asks her what will happen if she fails in doing so, and she tells him that in that case, the man whom she entrusted her heart to will do what must be done. He tells her he understands as he picks up the honor blade again and bids her farewell, telling her she knows where to reach him if she does need his help. She breaks down as she thinks that she now has to prove her worthiness to Wolverine, just as he has done to her. She doesn't want anyone to die in her name, nor die herself, but as the lord of the Yoshida clan, she has to take responsibility, no matter what the cost. Back in the Pacific Ocean, on the floating crash-landed flying boat, Scott is doing maintenance work on the engines of the aircraft, and Madeline tries to fix the radio, but the radio seems to be fried and the work on the engines is going slow. For the time being, it seems they will be adrift on the ocean's currents. It's a good thing they packed a lot of spare materials, so the engine should be fixable. But Scott points out that there's still a storm coming their way. Madeline asks if Scott wants a kiss as an incentive to get out of there, but as he reaches towards her, he slips off the wing of the aircraft. She's scared for him dropping into the water, but he tells her it will be alright since he can swim. But Madeline makes him aware of the fact that there are sharks in the water as well. One of them leaps out of the water and nearly bites Scott's legs clean off. He makes his way back on top of the wing at Madeline's side and blasts the shark with his eye beams. As they hug, Madeline can tell Scott is shaking. Despite all the adventures he's been on with the X-Men, getting eaten by a shark on his honeymoon is a bit too much. It's clear to the both of them that they really have to hurry now and get out of there, before the storm arrives and gives the shark another chance at human meat. Unaware to Madeline and Scott though, there are far greater threats under the water. The shark Scott has just blasted with his optic blast has just become a prey instead of being the hunter. At that moment, in Washington DC, there's a whole different kind of threat developing. Henry Peter Gyrick of the National Security Council is making his way towards the meeting. He has been summoned by the President's National Security Advisor, but he wasn't informed on what the topic would be. He has his suspicions though. He assumes it's about Project Wideawake. As he steps into the conference room, he sees the meeting has already started without him. The topic is the destruction of a city by a volcano in Siberia, Russia, some months ago. The volcanic eruption was not due to natural circumstances, however, but induced by the self-styled master of magnetism, Magneto. Supposedly he had warned the Russians to evacuate the city and no one was killed during this show of power. But that show of power was a warning in itself. He let the world know that he could repeat this anywhere in the world, even on American soil. Before the speaker can continue, the man who called this meeting, Judge Petrie, makes sure that Gyrick is properly settled at the table. The judge makes sure he knows who the speaker is and the person beside him, who is Dr. Valerie Cooper. Gyrick knows these people by reputation, but hasn't actually met them. He takes a look around the table and he sees all kinds of representatives of military and civilian security departments in the government, and wonders what the judge is up to. Frank Lowell, the speaker on the podium of the CIA, continues speaking. He tells everyone present that Magneto had issued a worldwide ultimatum to disarm all nuclear weaponry and hand over absolute sovereignty to him, or suffer the consequences. The Russian response was to launch a missile strike at Magneto's base of operations. And in return, he caused a submarine, which launched the missiles, to sink to the bottom of the sea and continued its destruction of the city in Siberia. After that, nothing was heard from Magneto. He never carried out his ultimatum. It's assumed he was either bluffing, changed his mind, or was stopped by some other force. The United States government calculated that with Magneto's powers, he would have been able to carry out his threats, even if he had been opposed by superhero groups such as the Avengers. As a matter of fact, research indicates that if the Avengers themselves would attempt the conquest of the Earth, they could do so with ease. One single team, a handful of superpowered beings, could be considered a threat in itself. And there are more and more superpowered beings popping up every day, all around the globe. Frank then hands over the microphone to Dr. Valerie Cooper to conclude today's briefing. She informs everyone present that the problem lies with mutants, a relatively new evolutionary branch of Homo sapiens, gifted with extraordinary abilities at birth. Gifts that truly set them apart from humanity. And the most prominent among the mutants are the X-Men. At first, the concerns about mutants was merely a biological concern, thinking they would one day replace Homo sapiens as the rulers of the Earth, much like the Cro-Magnon had the Neanderthal. Where at first it was thought that the United States enjoyed virtual monopoly of these superpowered beings, mutant or otherwise, this is no longer the case. Instead, today, mutants or adults having superpowers have been identified literally everywhere around the globe. And in certain parts of the world, governments and private organizations have taken interest in exploiting these people and their powers for personal gains and political benefit. Dr. Valerie Cooper then proceeds to give examples of how dangerous these kinds of powers could be for the country's integrity. It's imperative for the government to be able to protect themselves, and, if necessary, strike back. Gyrick then asks her a question, whether she's suggesting a strike force of mutants of their own, and points out to her that Magneto's initial gripe with humanity was that they will be wanting to use mutants, enslave them, and eventually out of fear destroy them. He tries to make her aware that her plans might actually convince the mutants that Magneto had been right all along. She then asks him in return if his alternative is to do nothing then, and he tells her that for the moment, yes, it is. She then asks Gyrick if he thinks that the Russians will be upholding an Escavalierian attitude, and she continues her argument that mutants pose a clear and present danger to the country, one that must be dealt with today, at once, for tomorrow it might be too late. In the Pacific, in the middle of a rainstorm, Scott is done with the repair work on the engine of the plane, and tells Madeline to give it a try. It starts to run, but pretty much immediately a fire starts inside, and he tells her to turn it off again. Scott realizes he made a mistake somewhere, but he can't figure out what it is. Madeline makes a joke about how it's too bad that she's not the Phoenix like Mastermind would have them believe, because then she could have just flown them out of their current situation. But the joke doesn't fall right with Scott at all. He tells her that if she had only the slightest idea of what the Phoenix was, she wouldn't be joking about it. Madeline tells him that she, as the sole survivor of a plane crash, knows a thing or two about death, resurrection, nightmares and miracles. As a matter of fact, it's a miracle how they found one another. Scott then makes a joke about how there's no storms in space, and Madeline tells him there's no life there either. When Madeline tells him he needs to get back to trying to repair the airplane because they fought too hard for their lives to give up now, there's a tentacle emerging out of the water and starts grabbing the floating aircraft. We then switch over to New York City, not to the high skyscrapers, but instead deep below the ground, to the home of the Morlocks, mutant outcasts of society that choose to live in the sewers and the tunnels below the city, far away from the rest of humanity, whom they have no care for. Strangers and intruders are not welcome here, and at this very moment, Caliban finds intruders in the small place he calls his home. He tells the intruders, who are actually his fellow Morlocks Thunder, Callisto and Mask, to get out. Callisto asks him if that's how he chooses to greet his old friends. She tells him that they were getting worried, because they had not seen him around for a while and were wondering if something was wrong, as she lays her arm over his shoulder. She tells him that even though she has been deposed as the leader of the Morlocks by the X-Men Storm, she still cares about her people. But Caliban tells her he just wants to be left alone. That's when Mask points out he knows what's bugging Caliban, holding a picture of Kitty Pryde and telling everyone Caliban's still sour because he can't have her for himself. Caliban tells him to shut up and grabs the picture from Mask's hand, getting even more angry and telling the others the picture is his and the room is his, and he wants them to go away and to be left alone. Callisto tells Caliban that he will have to throw them out. The four of them founded the Morlocks, and she asks him that if they don't look after one another, then who will? Caliban drops to his knees and tells her he feels so ashamed. He tells Callisto that Kitty had promised him to stay with Caliban forever if he would help her in liberating the X-Men, as he clings on to the picture of Kitty. So he did. Out of love for Kitty, he betrayed his only real friends. But Kitty lied to him and never returned. Callisto plays into the sadness and tells him that he's a poor thing for following his heart, making him look like a fool, and Caliban agrees. He tells Callisto that her hatred is what he deserves. Callisto tells him it's not his fault, but Kitty's, since she gave him her word, and she intends to keep her to it. Caliban desperately asks her if she is really being truthful and not making fun of him. She then tells him to be patient and calm, and to trust and to obey her, and she will make sure that he gets his heart's desire. Mask reminds Callisto that Storm is now the boss, and asks her what will happen if she objects. She tells Mask that then Callisto herself will get her own heart's desire as well. Back in the Pacific, Scott and Madeline give the plane another try. Scott starts up the engines and Madeline hauls in the anchor, which was keeping the plane in its place the whole time. But as she tries to pull it in, she notices that it seems to be stuck on something. She gets grabbed by several tentacles, screams out and gets pulled under the water. Scott hears her but can't make out what happened. He's not sure if she fell or got yanked overboard due to the heavy rainfall. He jumps into the water, trying to rescue Madeline. As he approaches her, he can see she's struggling with the tentacles, and she screams out for him. He fires his optic blast trying to free her from its grip, but at the same time he's getting grabbed himself. He gets pulled deeper underwater and nearly loses his glasses. He can't lose them or he won't be able to see what's going on down there, without blasting everything inside, including Madeline. He sees a squid of an immense size, something out of the movies. He knows he can be gentle with his thing and starts blasting away. The creature releases both of them and Scott makes his way to Madeline, hoping the squid will leave them be, but that's not what happens at all. He gets attacked again from behind and one of the tentacles grabs him by the head, making him lose the glasses this time around. One of the tentacles wraps around his face, making itself a target at point blank range. Scott opens his eyes, blasts the tentacles and makes his way up to the surface. He calls out for Madeline and she tells him she's right behind him. He's telling her to keep yelling so he knows where to swim to, because he lost his glasses and has to keep his eyes shut. She asks him if he killed the creature, but Scott doubts that he has. Probably only made it angry. Madeline tells him to keep swimming straight ahead and that the plane isn't very far. But the squid grabs him by the ankle again. His lungs aren't totally filled with air, so he knows he has to make quick work of things. He can feel the pull on his leg going straight downwards and figures that's where the creature must be. He doesn't have to worry about Madeline being in the line of fire anymore and lashes out full power at the squid. He wonders how it will handle getting zapped at maximum power. He knows he took care of it, but he has no idea if he can make it to the surface in time. His lungs are starting to hurt and he barely has any oxygen left in his lungs. He makes it to the surface, but he has no idea where he is and where he has to go to. can't open his eyes because he might destroy the airplane. That's when he gets grabbed again. But this time, not by the squid, but by Madeline, who's telling him to stop struggling already. She guides him back to the plane, and once he's inside, she'll take care of the anchor so they can leave. Scott barely makes it inside, even with Madeline's help. He swallowed too much ocean water and feels sick. All he can think about is lying down and die, and he realizes that if he doesn't get his act together, he will. He needs to find his flight bag, since that contains his costume and his visor, allowing him control over his optic blast again. And even if Madeline runs into any trouble now, he will at least be able to help her properly. Scott can feel the anchor has been pulled back on board since the plane is starting to move all over the place due to the waves, and Madeline makes her way back inside. They try to start the engines again, but the same thing happens. They won't start up all the way. Madeline says that's no wonder because the engines must be soaking wet by now. They have to keep trying until it works. He asks for a kiss for good luck, and Madeline tells him pilots never depend on good luck. This is a kiss for love, and they are two of the best. But they get lucky after all, because the engines do start after another try and they are airborne. Once they reach an altitude above the clouds, Madeline has some bad news. They have no instrumentation, no radio, and a very long way to reach a very small island in the middle of a really huge ocean. Scott tells her they will make it alright. Madeline can clearly notice a shift in Scott's mood, and he tells her that the realization of still being alive has that effect sometimes. And also, he has made his mind up about joining his father and the Starjammers. He tells her that they are going to fight a war up there in space and that he's seen enough war. And death. He then tells her that the life his father has led has made him hard and sometimes even cruel. He does not want to be or become that way. He wants to be selfish for a while. He wants a life, a family, all the things he never had before becoming part of the X-Men. He tells her he wants her and wants to be happy, and he asks her if that's wrong. She tells him that sounds great to her and that his father will probably think the same way. He then says that it's a pity that the autopilot isn't working, but she tells him that she's too exhausted anyways. Regardless of that, she does love him, as he does her. And so begins the next chapter in Scott Summers and Madeline Summers Pryor's lives. Thanks for watching this video, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel if you haven't done so already, because that really helps me out in growing the channel and being able to produce more videos like this one. See you next episode.